Hey, you ever start to think about Russia beyond the headlines? I mean, we see all the time in the news, obviously, but consider this. The actual foundations of what we know as Russia. They were laid over 1,000 years ago.
Yeah, that's way before many nations we think of as old even existed as they do now.
Pretty wild, huh?
It really makes you rethink things. And that deep history, absolutely essential for understanding Russia today. Its past keeps echoing, it shapes the present and, well, definitely its future too.
Exactly. So for this deep dive, we've pulled together a whole range of interesting stuff. We're aiming to give you a much richer picture of Russia. We're talking ancient roots, where it might be headed by, say, 2050, what drives its economy, its culture, its global role.
Right.
Our goal is pretty simple, really. Pull out the most important, maybe surprising insights, give you a balanced view without, getting lost in the weeds. Think of it as your shortcut to being genuinely clued in on a really fascinating, complex country.
And it's a huge span of time and geography we're covering. So let's just dive right into those early days.
Okay, let's unpack this. So the story really kicks off in the 9th century.
Yeah.
Kievan Rosas. Now, geographically, this wasn't exactly modern Russia's location. Its heartland was more like present-day Ukraine and Belarus.
Hmm.
That specific point has some pretty big implications when you look at current events, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. Kievan Rus' was this crucial starting point, Slavic tribes mixing. It's where a lot of cultural, political traditions that later influenced Russia, Ukraine, and Belarus came from.
Mhm.
Then fast forward, 13th century, huge event, the Mongol invasion.
Right.
That had a really profound impact. It basically shattered the existing setup. And then Moscow gradually started to rise as the main power center after that.
Yeah, took a while. For centuries, those principalities were sort of under the thumb of the Mongol Golden Horde. Moscow had to consolidate. Then jump to the 16th century and boom, birth of the Russian Empire.
Hmm.
Ivan the Terrible declares himself the first Tsar, 1547.
Quite a statement.
Yeah. And from then on, the expansion,
Mm.
it was remarkably fast, wasn't it?
Oh, it was. The Tsarist period was just relentless expansion, pushing borders, controlling vast areas, and then you get figures like Peter the Great, 18th century,
Yeah.
real game changer,
Absolutely.
push through all this modernization, military, government, even like fashion, and really put Russia on the map as a European power. His ambition just completely changed Russia's path.
So centuries of czars, and then bang, 1917. The world flips upside down.
Mm-hmm.
Bolshevik Revolution.
Mm-hmm.
Suddenly, it's a totally different ballgame. Formation of the Soviet Union, the USSR, this communist state.
Yeah.
First Lenin, then Stalin.
A radical shift.
Huge global impact. It's hard to really overstate how much that changed the 20th century.
Yeah, the revolution in creating the Soviet Union brought in a completely different political economic system. Communism was the rule book.
Yeah.
And the USSR rose up, became one of the two global superpowers after World War II,
Right.
which, set the stage for the Cold War. That decades-long standoff with the U.S. shaped everything for generations.
And that whole Cold War period,
Right.
all the tension, the proxy conflicts, it defines so much of the last century.
Mm.
But then, almost suddenly, in historical terms, the whole thing crumbles. 1991, Soviet Union dissolves.
Gone.
And we get modern Russia,
Mm.
under Boris Yeltsin initially. And then, of course, 2000, Vladimir Putin arrives.
Mm-hmm.
And his leadership has really been the defining thing for contemporary Russia, hasn't it?
The end of the USSR was, well, transformative isn't a strong enough word. Huge upheaval for Russia, politically, economically. Putin coming in marked a new era, strengthening central government, a more assertive foreign policy,
Yeah.
which kind of brings us to where Russia stands now economically and globally.
Okay, so let's look under the hood a bit, the economy. It's heavily reliant on natural resources, yeah.
Very much so. Huge reserves. Oil, natural gas, coal, metals, minerals, you name it.
And they have their own stock market, right? The Moscow Exchange, MOEX.
Yeah.
So mostly these big resource companies.
Primarily, yes. Energy and material sectors dominate the MOEX. It reflects how important those resources are. Now, obviously, the sanctions in recent years, the conflict in Ukraine, that's created serious economic problems.
Sure.
But what's interesting is the resilience it's shown, partly because they've managed to pivot, increase trade with countries like China and India.
Which leads right into Russia's global influence.
Yeah.
It still carries a lot of weight geopolitically, doesn't it?
Definitely.
You see it active in the Middle East, Syria, its relationship with Iran. It's a massive player in energy markets. Those pipelines, they're more than just pipes, aren't they?
Absolutely. Russia uses its energy resources strategically. It's a key part of its foreign policy, energy diplomacy, some call it.
Right.
Controlling gas and oil supplies gives it leverage, particularly with Europe. Plus, it's active in international groups, a key part of BRICS.
Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa.
Exactly. It shows their ambition to be a major force in a world with multiple power centers.
And we can't ignore the military side. Russia's always ranked near the top globally, right? Second or third biggest military.
Usually, yes. And they have a massive nuclear arsenal, plus significant strengths in cyber, missile tech, even space.
Mm.
The conflict in Ukraine, sadly, is a clear example of their military assertiveness and the challenges that poses.
It really is. Russia's military power is undeniably a huge factor in its global standing.
They've invested heavily in advanced tech, and they've shown they're willing to use their power. It cements their position as a major military player. The conflicts it's been embraved in are pretty stark examples of its capabilities and, well, its strategic goals in its neighborhood and beyond.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit. What's daily life actually like for ordinary Russians? We hear so much politics, but what about the culture?
That's crucial, yeah. For a full picture, Russians are often seen as very resilient. There's a deep national pride, a sort of cultural focus on the collective. They might seem reserved at first, maybe a bit formal. But there's a strong tradition of warmth, hospitality, especially once you're in.
Interesting.
And art, literature, history, they're deeply embedded. Think Tolstoy, Dostoevsky. Their work still really matters there.
Sounds like a fascinating mix. And I guess there's a big difference in lifestyle between, say, Moscow or St. Petersburg and the more rural parts.
Oh, absolutely. Big cities often have high living standards, modern stuff, lots going on culturally. Rural areas, they can face more economic hurdles. Access to services, opportunities might be harder to come by.
Right.
But across the board, there tends to be a strong value placed on education. Russia has a long history of excellence in science, medicine.
And that national identity you mentioned.
Yeah.
It seems like a real blend. Almost European elegance meets something more rugged, maybe Asian influence.
That's a good way to put it.
You see it in the culture, the ballet, classical music, but also this intense patriotic pride, often tied to Russian Orthodox Christianity.
The cultural mix is really interesting. Draws from Europe, but also from its huge Asian landmass. Orthodox Christianity has profoundly shaped values, culture, influences art, architecture, social norms, holidays, everything. And while it's dominant, Russia's also home to other groups. Muslims, Buddhists, Jews. They all add to the country's cultural fabric.
Now, let's zoom in on one specific relationship. Russia and India. Seems particularly relevant right now. My understanding is there's a generally positive view of Russia and India,
Yeah.
a friendship going way back even to Nehru's time.
Yes, that's right.
It feels like many in India see Russia as, well, reliable,
Yeah.
maybe compared to some Western nations who haven't always been consistent allies.
The India-Russia strategic partnership is definitely significant today. A big part of it is defense cooperation. India is a major buyer of Russian military gear, S-400 missiles, Sukhoi jets, things like that.
Right.
But beyond military stuff, India also imports a lot of Russian oil, fertilizers, coal, and even with sanctions, that bilateral trade, especially within BRICS, is still a priority for both.
So, real tangible benefits, economically and strategically, for both sides. And it looks like there are growing opportunities for Indians in Russia, too.
Yeah.
Like affordable medical degrees, MBBS specifically, business in oil, pharma, tech, even tourism and film shoots.
That's correct. Russia does offer opportunities for Indians. And getting a tourist visa is relatively straightforward. Usually costs around $40 to $70, takes maybe 4 to 10 working days, so it makes travel, those people-to-people links, easier.
Of course, for a full picture, we have to talk about some of the criticisms often leveled at Russia, particularly around civil liberties.
Sure.
We hear a lot about media control, cracking down on opposition, internet surveillance.
It's vital to acknowledge those concerns. Limitations on free speech, media independence, political opposition, they are real issues. At the same time, it's also, well, true that a large part of the Russian population does support the government, often driven by national pride, maybe a desire for stability, strong leadership. It's complex, not simple.
And then there are reports about xenophobia sometimes that foreigners might face. Though I gather experiences can differ a lot between big cities and more remote areas.
Yeah, like many large, diverse countries, Russia isn't immune to prejudice or cultural clashes. Big cities are usually more cosmopolitan, more used to diversity. Less diverse rural areas might, present different challenges for outsiders. It's important to know experiences can really vary.
Okay, looking ahead a bit.
Yeah.
It sounds like there's a pretty dynamic youth population in Russia, really into tech, innovation, active in crypto, startups, robotics. And it's interesting, too, that there are dissenting voices, especially among younger people, anti-war feelings wanting reform.
Absolutely. The younger generation in Russia holds significant potential for change. Their embrace of tech, their drive,
Yeah.
it points to a dynamic future. And the existence of different views, including critical ones, shows it's a complex, evolving society.
Looking even further out, maybe towards 2050, there seems to be this kind of vision emerging for Russia. With its huge Arctic territory, it's positioned to be a massive player regarding climate change resource management there.
Yeah.
Plus, it'll likely keep key roles in energy, space tech, maybe even AI and warfare. But there are big long-term challenges too, right? Population decline,
Yeah.
potential internal tensions.
Russia's future path definitely looks like a mix of big opportunities and pretty serious challenges. Its resources, location, tech investments could make it a major global influencer. But yeah, demographics, internal social dynamics, those will be crucial.
Mhm.
And those talks you sometimes hear about easier travel, maybe visa-free within BRICS nations, that could also really change its global engagement in the decades ahead.
And right at the center of it all,
Yeah.
literally and figuratively, you have the Kremlin, the enduring seat of power.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't really discuss modern Russia without talking about Vladimir Putin. His long, often controversial leadership has just left such a huge mark.
The Kremlin is still the symbolic heart, the functional center of Russian political power. And Putin's long time in charge has undeniably had a profound, complicated impact domestically, internationally. Lots of different views on that worldwide.
So wrapping up this deep dive, what really strikes me is the sheer complexity, the contradictions almost. You've got this incredibly deep, ancient history right alongside very modern ambitions, a culture that can feel, I don't know, reserved, but also intensely warm, immense power, but also something mysterious.
Yeah.
It's clearly so much more than just the politics and oil headlines we usually get. It's this fascinating mix of history, culture, resilience, and a definite vision for its future.
Indeed. Russia really does defy easy labels. Its rich history, its ongoing evolution. It's a compelling paradox that just keeps shaping global events.
So we've journeyed from Kiev unrest right through to these possible 2050 scenarios, touching on so much in between. It's clear Russia's story is far from over. And thinking about that deep history and those big future goals, what unexpected forces, what unforeseen global shifts might ultimately decide Russia's place in the world going forward? Definitely gives you something to chew on.